Hey everyone, this is Mike. Today we're back at World Flipper and we're going to be taking a look at one of the teams that I've been using for the last week or so, trying to make it a little bit stronger, because this team is actually really strong and very flexible in all of the content that you can do with it. The exact team that I'm going to be showing I've been able to use in all of the content in the game except level 70 Labyrinth, but for the wind advantage level 70 Labyrinth I've been able to use this team with 1 unit difference, which I'll be showing as well. So the main reason why this team came to be was because, of course, there was a big wind nerf to the comboing of wind back when they, right after the banner of Filia ended, I believe. It was right before Christmas, something like that. So a lot of people started looking at some alternatives, and now with this new event being wind advantage, people came up with a one-shot comp. Now, because I don't have all of the units for the one-shot comp, and I also don't have all of the mana boards available to me, because I've also only been playing for like the last 2 weeks or so, I've actually taken this comp and kind of changed it around a little bit with some of the units that I had and some stuff that I thought would work, and it's been working pretty well. So, what do we have? We have Soushiro and Veron as our leader and his sub. In our second team we have Shasusu and Aurora, and then for the last two we have Filia and Cagliostro as our healers. So basically Soushiro is our main damage dealer, Shasusu, our second team, together with Aurora are our party buffers, and then Filia and Cagliostro are our healers, which are making it so that we can sustain for quite some time, because both Filia and Cagliostro will heal. Filia also gives an HP boost to all of our wind characters, so we're basically going to be a lot more tanky if we run both of those, and if they activate their skill, they're also going to be healing the team for a very large amount. So what is the kind of purpose of this team? So the synergy behind it is that our Soushiro will deal a lot of damage, and then our other characters are basically going to be boosting that damage through various buffs. So whenever a lightning character uses a skill, Soushiro is going to gain damage boost because we are using the Thunder Axe on him from the Thunder boss, raid boss. Then on Shasusu we are running the Lich King Axe, which is going to make our damage higher when we have float. The reason why we have that is because we have Aurora, who is going to give us float, and we have Filia, who is going to give us float. And then last but not least, on Filia, we are running the Orochi sword, which gives us more damage when we have the penetration buff effect, which Veron will give us. So at the start of the fight, Shasusu is going to start out with 100% gauge because she is run as a main character, meaning that we are instantly going to be activating that float buff from Aurora. And then after that, Soushiro is going to be having 100% gauge because of his main and leader effect, giving him 30% skill gauge as a leader, and then when he's run as main he also gets 70% skill gauge as well. And of course Shasusu also gives 30% gauge if Soushiro's mana board was not maxed, then he would be able to use his skill immediately afterwards as well. And then when Soushiro activates his skill, we're getting the penetration effect from Veron, which is then going to trigger the effect of the Orochi sword. Soushiro himself deals a bunch of damage as basically a nuke, because it's just a one-hit thing, but then Veron is going to have that penetration buff active for quite a while, together with that big AoE around him, and that paired up with float is going to make it so that he can bounce around quite a bit and deal a bunch of AoE damage, because Veron's own skill damage is really high as well. Other than this, of course, Filia and Cagliostro are only there to heal up the party and basically make it so that we can sustain, but there are a few differences that we can take to the party as well. But let's first take a look at what each of the characters do before we take a look at that. So Soushiro himself starts out with 100% gauge because he's run as a leader as well as a main. Of course, if you run them as a leader, you immediately have him as a main as well. And he'll basically gain a attack boost at the start of the battle, and he'll also gain bonus damage against broken and downed enemies. This is a very important thing when we take a look at the one-shot comp later. Then Veron gives us that penetration effect that we want, gets a self-attack buff up when he uses his skill. His passives gives him 30% bonus attack for himself, and then when the penetrate buff is active he gets another 60% as well. So after Soushiro did his burst, we still have a whole lot of damage coming out of Veron. Then Shasusu is basically there to just boost our leader, gives leader attack, every time you activate the skill gives leader attack, and then also we give the leader a skill gauge, so whenever Shasusu goes, Soushiro can go right after with more skill damage from not only activating the Thunder Axe weapon that he's wielding, but also from the bonus effects that Shasusu gives. Then together with Shasusu, Aurora goes, which does a little bit of damage around him, and then also grants us that float buff, which we want that float buff because that procs the Lich King Axe as well as Aurora's passive, which give party members that have float active 15% bonus attack. If you don't want to run Aurora and you're looking to do more damage, Pogito is actually a very good substitute for him, because Pogito is actually stronger when it comes to providing damage for your team, as Aurora does not give as much buffs as Pogito does. Now, the only reason why I am running Aurora instead of Pogito is because Aurora gives us more HP and more sustain. Whenever I ran Pogito as the sub for Shasusu, it always felt like my team would just die too quick, and that's something that I didn't really want. So that's why Aurora is here instead of Pogito. If I were doing some content where I really just want to burst down a boss, I'll be swapping him out with Pogito instead. Then for our healers, we have of course Philia. Whenever she's as a main, she'll automatically heal party members for 30% of their maximum HP once they fall below 60%, so that's really good, keeping up that sustain. When party members have a float buff, all of the wind characters will also grant 30% attack boost. Of course, Soushiro is a wind character, so he's going to be getting more damage from that. And it also increases wind characters' HP by 10%, thus giving us more of a buffer, I guess you could say, more sustain. And then of course her skill heals everyone, not only your team, but if you're doing co-op, it also heals the other teams as well, so it's really great for co-op. And it will also grant the float buff, thus again proccing the Lich King Axe again to all of your allies. Cagliostro then is going to be healing as well, also dealing some damage, of course, because she's kind of like a combination of that. Whenever she uses a skill, you're going to give 5% of a healing boost to your effectiveness, I guess you could say, to your party as well. So the longer the fight draws out, Cagliostro is going to be healing more and more. And every time she gets healed, you're also going to be increasing her own skill damage. So she's really good for long, drawn-out fights, like for example a Labyrinth. Now, talking about Labyrinth, whenever I did that for at least a level 71, you're actually switching out Aurora for Caillou. This is a water 3-star character that gives us an attack buff, a regeneration buff, all attributes resistance down, so that's kind of bad, but also HP recovery. So she's basically another third healer, and instead of giving us a float buff, she's going to be giving us an attack buff instead. Also, whenever party members are above 80% HP, she's going to be increasing the damage by 20%, or at least their attack. And when party members recover HP, it's going to be increasing the damage by another 2% permanently, all the way up to 20%. So, meaning that we have 3 healers, we're basically going to make it so that we have a lot of healing in our party, so we're going to be able to proc this passive quite a lot as well. So that's what I run for Labyrinth. Now, let's take a look at the one-shot comp, because that one is pretty good as well. So when we go in the one-shot comp, we're going to be taking out all of our healers, and we're going to be doing the following. So we're switching out Aurora for Pogito, because as I said before, Pogito does give us that extra damage, gives 15% when the party is floating, increases float duration, and also grants us an attack buff as well as a skill damage buff. So it's a really good buffer, especially when we're talking about floating. Now, we're going to be switching out Veron for Murakamo. If you don't have him yet, you can of course always grind for him in the Orochi raid. You'll be able to get him eventually, and we'll be running him as a sub for Soushiro, because not only will he grant an attack increase from 60% at the start of the battle, he also has increased ability to down enemies by 600%, so it's really good to down enemies. And if you remember, Soushiro has increased damage against downed enemies. And when he uses his skill, he grants himself an attack buff as well as a damage buff to broken and downed enemies, again buffing Soushiro's damage again a lot as well. Now, to burst all of the enemies down and make sure that they're on the floor, we're going to be running Leon as well as Ark in the final team. Leon will make it so that we give everybody an attack buff, not only your team but everybody in the co-op team as well. And that's pretty much there. That's pretty much the only reason why we run him, because his 2 passives aren't that amazing, because they're not really gonna have the time to proc, because we're going to be one-shotting the boss. The reason why we run Arc as a sub is because he starts out with 100% skill gauge, increases the party member's attack by 10%, and again grants a room-wide attack buff to everyone. Now, to make this one-shot comp work, you do need two things: a lot of mana board upgrades and two teammates that will be running the exact same team as you, because what you will be doing is you'll be using Shasusu to give yourself that float buff as well as the damage increase, and you'll be using Leon to basically do as much damage to the boss as possible, give you and your party members all of the attack buffs. Then you wait until the 6th chain comes out, because everybody used those two skills. Then that 6th chain will basically floor the boss, and then you use Soushiro's attack together with Murakamo, and that will one-shot the boss. Of course, you do need your whole team to do this, and you need all of these specific units to be very much upgraded through their mana board. So being able to do this is going to take quite a while and is quite expensive, but if you can pull it off, it is really strong as well. Now, of course, I don't run this because I don't have Murakamo yet, and I also don't have friends that have the exact units needed to do this. But when we take a look at the team that I talked about in the beginning, it is a really strong team. It is very flexible in the type of content that you can do. As I said, I've been able to auto everything in the game except level 70 Labyrinth, which is incredibly good. And then of course for the level 70 Wind Advantage Labyrinth, I have been able to auto that where I swap out Aurora for Caillou. So this team is incredibly strong. It's something that I recommend people to go after a little bit as well, because there are so many 3-star characters in here that we can swap out. We also have a few 4-stars, of course, which is Soushiro or Shasusu. Then Aurora can be switched out by Pojito, which is a 2-star that you can just grind for. And then of course there are some healers that you could maybe swap out if you don't have Filia or Cagliostro. You can put something else in there as well, like Arc, to get that extra burst off, for example. And there's a bunch of other units that you can put in there as well, like for example Lester, which you can get from grinding Lich or something, because he's really good in flow teams as well. So there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this team. So that's pretty much it for me. Just wanted to kind of show you this team that I've been working on and how much actual damage that you can do with it, because it is quite insane how much damage you're dealing, but also how sustainable your team is in the end as well. So that's it for me. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.